Welcome back to the Commissioner's Corner. Again, I am Scott Vargo. This is Thomas Davidson, Karn Stiegelmeier, and soon to be former County Commissioner Dan Gibbs. So we wanted to talk a little bit about so Dan was elected back at the November election for his final term as County Commissioner. We also had a question on that we call 1A that we have now taken to start calling Strong Future. The reason for that is all of our questions are 1A questions. And every year they become more and more confusing as to which 1A are we talking about. So in this particular case, we're calling this 1A Strong Future. And so that's what I'll refer to it as. Karn, you want to kick off, talk a little bit about the election itself and then about one of the issue areas, the recycling area within Strong Future?
Sure. This was really brought forward from a lot of community members interested in specific areas that are part of the Strong Future. That thank you to the voters. This is really important to all of us in Summit County. It really is about a strong future. There are issues from our preschoolers who we want to be part of our Strong Future to recycling. And wildfire, you're still doing that, right?
That's right. You're not off the hook yet, buddy.
So there have been committees or organizations that have worked on these issues for years in most cases. And they were brought forward to us. All of us were involved with all of these issues as well. But there were and still are very strong community groups that brought these pieces to us to put together as what we need for Summit County. And so one piece of that is recycling. Mm-hmm. And this is dealing with a long-term issue of what people are grappling with throughout the nation. This paradigm of we want to recycle more. We need to stop filling up landfills and sending plastic to the ocean. We don't do that in Summit County, but it is a worldwide problem. And so the paradigm is that most everywhere the recycling programs function on fees from tipping fees of trash, and that just doesn't work to solve the problem. So that's what the Zero Waste Task Force has been looking at for years. How do we resolve this? How do we move forward and do more recycling, less waste? And we don't want to fill up our landfill and look for another location. There isn't one. So anyway, the committee has met recently since the question passed, and we're really excited to look at offering more recycling and more composting. And a lot of this is yet to be completed by this group that has been involved for years, but we are looking at a new recycling facility somewhere at the north end of the county. Waste Management used to operate one, and so there's been an empty spot there and a lot of concern from that end of the county. We're looking at some more glass recycling, mm-hmm. and then a really big deal is the composting. And we're looking at commercial composting. There is an existing program if you're interested in doing your household composting. Composting individually doesn't work that well in Summit County. It's either too cold or it's bear season. So our facility has done a fabulous job of doing really good compost and selling that, and so that's revenue, and it's one of the most important things we can do to reduce methane in the landfill. So a lot of exciting work, and you'll be hearing soon about what's going on with increasing your own recycling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And the other piece of that is, again, some of that funding will go towards the programs that are existing today with recycling or have been existing with recycling, and alleviate the reliance on those tipping fees so that we don't have this encouragement. We want to go to zero waste, but then we can't do the recycling programs. And so this offsets some of that funding that was coming from tipping garbage, dumping garbage at the landfill as well. Dan, as Karn mentioned, wildfire has been one of your things while you've been here. You'll be in charge of the Division of Forestry. Is that the name of it, proper title of it, at Department of Natural Resources? So you will still be involved in forestry. We were just talking this morning, actually, about the fact that we're working on some stuff with Colorado State Forest, on some timber cuts with our open space properties. And I said, if we
That's
need
gonna go a lot
something,
better now.
yeah, I said, if we
Exactly.
need something from the state, I think we've got
know a
it
guy.
in. We know somebody.
We know a
so,
guy.
So talk about wildfire and what's sort of on the horizon with the wildfire money coming
Yeah.
from this question.
There's a component of wildfires that was part of the funding question with about $1 million. And so we have currently a Summit County Wildfire Council that's been in place for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And it's made up of the towns, the county, and the fire districts. And we make decisions really based on looking at our community wildfire protection plan. We use that as a living, breathing document that we update annually normally. And so based on the priorities that are listed in our community wildfire protection plan, we will likely be recommending funding proposals to come forward to really look at defensible space, looking at this past year the fire districts and actually many of the towns too pitched in to fund full-time seasonal people that were more or less like wildfire technicians that were hiking the trails looking for unattended campfires. And they had a very productive year, to say the least, of everything that they did. So yeah, really excited about that part. And but our community wildfire protection plan and this wildfire council will be kind of the sounding board and the advisory group that will advise the county commissioners on how to spend those monies. But
I mean, we've got quite a few thousand acres that have been approved through NEPA for treatment, but we just don't have all the funding that we need, right?
Right. And you look at the landscape in back of us and
Looks like forest.
Yeah, it looks like forest. but if we take a closer look, you'll see areas that are, I guess that's mostly unincorporated Summit County there, but you'll see U.S. Forest Service boundary, you'll see unincorporated. If you go down the hill a little bit more, you hit the town of Silverthorne. And so wildfires don't know the difference between federal, state, and local lands, and that's why I think this funding is so important that it can really be used collectively, throughout Summit County, recognizing that let's not worry about boundaries. Let's worry about where people live, where we can protect human life, property, and critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
And we'll be working closely with the folks from DNR within the State Forest Service, particularly because the U.S. government, as we all know, is in a shutdown, which means we don't have access to most of our U.S. Forest Service partners to work with them on some of these projects. So we had begun that process, begun the conversations around the dispersed rec, these ranger patrols, for next season or this coming season as well. And right now, that's all sort of on shutdown mode as well, because all of those folks that deal with those contracts, et cetera, are off on furlough. So we're hoping that comes to an end quickly and that those guys can get back in the game and we can begin the conversations more with them on those programs, as well as the large swaths of acreage that have been NEPA approved in the forest, but the federal government doesn't have funding for those that we can try and help out with and spur along.
Just thinking of the government shutdown, it is so scary to think of. There's so many different partners when you're fighting a forest fire. And I want to say 2008 or so, I was fighting a fire in Boulder County called the Old Stage Fire, and that was in January. And so you just never know.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
I mean,
No doubt.
I think in
Scary.
Summit County, it'd be very slim to none probably in the winter time, but just the rest of the state can be very crispy dry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thomas, you looked like you wanted to say something about the shutdown.
No, I'm just imagining Dan down in Denver going, in Summit County, here's how we dealt with that problem.
I'm going to guess that would be a popular refrain. All right, we are again encountering another situation where we're editing, so I apologize for that. We just finished up talking about wildfire. We're going to talk now about Summit Preschool, which is another portion of the Strong Future funding. So preschool for 4-year-olds. Thomas, you want to talk about that?
So
Quickly before we get interrupted again.
Exactly. Before we break into another fight. That's what we're editing out for. We all saved it to the end. So preschool. Summit County partnered with the school district, with some of the nonprofits here in the county. FERC and our Early Childhood Options were both involved in this, the child care centers. we went out and hired a consultant called Early Milestones. This group was instrumental in modeling the program for the Denver preschool program. So we worked off of that. And again, thank you to the voters, but we've already got the applications out to people with regards to tuition assistance for preschool, and a lot more to come from this group with regards to building a program so that folks with 4-year-olds will be able to get assistance from us with the tuition for preschool, as well as us working on the curricula and everything else to make sure that when kids arrive at kindergarten, they're all equally ready to learn how to start their education here in Summit County. So big kudos to Julie McCluskey. She worked hard on this one. So did Lucinda and Tamara with ECO and FERC respectively. And many ongoing thanks to Carrie Bueller and all of Summit School District for partnering with the county. And yeah, we're really looking forward to helping folks out with regards to just the incredible costs of childcare 0 through 5, and this program will really kind of take 1 year and really help people out quite a bit with regards to those costs. So. Yeah.
So a quick segue off of that to another item that is part of the Strong Future funding, and that is public and community facilities funding. So there's about $1.6 million as part of the Strong Future funding annually that goes towards those facilities, whether it's renovations or new facilities entirely. A chunk of that, $500,000 per year, is dedicated or identified to go towards a child care facility. So building the capacity up as we, again, will have more kids, we hope, we would expect, as 4-year-olds going to preschools. There's a need for more slots as well, and many folks that have very young kids recognize that from the wait lists that they've experienced as well.
Yeah.
So again, some of that funding will go towards a child care center. Right now that appears to be a center that will be somewhere on the north end of town, and we're working with local governments, with school district, with others to try to identify what is the most appropriate location and what exactly would that facility look like and house. So we're working on that as part of this public facilities funding. The other funding will go towards a variety of other upgrades, renovations, new facilities within the county facilities themselves. And so we did a study in 2015, a master plan effort for the County Commons campus, and identified a number of needs there. And so right now there's a group that is working to try to prioritize some of those projects. Included in that are the road realignment that comes down from the hospital campus to the main County Commons campus, the moving of the sand salt building from the backyard of the Ophir neighborhood to an area that is much removed from that.
We're not going to move the building, it's falling apart.
Yes, a new building, I should say. Yes, a new building, sorry. We may leave the old building up as a sound buffer,
yeah,
because it's a beautiful facility.
Historic relic.
Yeah, historic relic, that's a good description. So we're also looking at expansions at the North Branch Library, expansions at the Community and Senior Center, renovations of the Emergency Services building to turn that into an emergency operations center, as well as a training facility, work on a search and rescue facility, upgrades to road and bridge, etc. So there's a large list of projects within that campus that will be part of this funding source as well.
I think it's important to mention just quickly, one of the reasons why we added this in, both Tabor and Gallagher really have pretty severe effects if you're funded by property taxes. And so for us, we were getting hit hard because of Gallagher right now. And so one of the things that we decided as commissioners was to basically sort of next to zero out our capital accounts in order to keep operations funded for the county. And so, we went to you all as voters and said, we need some additional money for capital if we're going to keep facilities upgraded and going to meet demands. So that's kind of part of why this was part of this part of this question.
Yeah, and this funding will generate, I'm going to just round off, about $10 million over the life of the Strong Future funding. The plans associated with the county commons alone are in the $50 to $60 million range, and so we're not looking at this funding covering all of those expenses, but
By
at
no
least giving us
means.
a jump start
Right.
to get some of those projects implemented. It's a 20-year master plan, and so we think that that's effective.
So we were joking about the sand salt building, but it truly is falling apart.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
Yeah.
like, ugh.
It has literally blown out the back of the building, and so there's sand sort of spilling out the back edge. So that is desperate need of replacement,
Yeah.
and we would not bother to move it. You're right. We will move the sand, perhaps.
Right, yeah, well, keep the sand.
All right, the last item that's in the Strong Future question was mental health funding. Who wants to talk about mental health funding?
Well, this again was a community group, a large community effort. We are not unlike many communities looking at suicide rates first and foremost, and then the bigger picture of mental health. And we are not alone in this whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's being looked at throughout the country. If we could just put down our cell phones, maybe we'd all be more stable. But there are a lot of efforts going on around the state and around the country, and we have people here who we've lost because of suicides. That was a lot of the impetus. It is a bigger picture of mental health. We have very important, wonderful community members who've come to the table and been
Yeah.
working hard on this.
So a big shout out to the Building Hope group, right? And so, that was Jenny Bradley, that was Jamie Fitzsimons, that was Tim Casey and his daughter Betsy Casey. The FERC was involved in this as well. It all ran through the Summit Foundation. So again, thank you, Summit Foundation. But, that group came together and really started advocating to us that this needs to be part of the question. We turned around and went to Andrew Romanoff at Mental Health Colorado to say, hey, we need your consulting services to help us figure out, what services, what amounts of money. We'll be working closely with the community care clinic and the school-based health centers to get better services here into the schools, as well as a long list of other services. But boy, oh boy, that was a great team that came together, and thank gosh they did, and came to us, and we figured out how to get them into this question as well, right?
Yeah, one other big area is crisis response, and so
Yeah.
there is work with law enforcement to try to do some cooperative work around mental health and trying to address situations where people are in crisis in a different way than what we do today, which oftentimes ends up with folks incarcerated when that really isn't the best solution for them. So trying to work through some of those issues in a different fashion. We've seen some other jurisdictions outside of Summit County implementing programs like that have been successful, and I know that Sheriff Fitzsimons is a strong proponent of that effort as well. So we'll likely see some activity in that area as part of this funding. So.
Yeah.
Anything else that anybody wants to add about Strong Future or about Commissioner Gibbs?
Well, I think with regards to Strong Future, the really happy thing, I think, for all of us on election night was to see it pass by over 60%, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's huge. So thank you, voters of Summit County, for that level of support. Thank you to all of the different advisory committees that are going to help us and watch us in terms of how we go forward with these monies. So in conclusion, just want to thank all of the voters of Summit County for supporting the question. And I think that we were really happy on election night to see it pass by over 60%. So that's an incredible level of support for the question and for these issues. And a big thanks to all of the different advisory groups that will continue to help us as we implement these programs.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, and so for those of you that didn't see segment 1 of our show, this is Dan Gibbs' last appearance as a county commissioner on the Commissioner's Corner, or formerly known as County Connection. And we will greatly miss Dan, and we're very proud and excited for him to take on a new challenge at the state as the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Natural Resources. So with that, we'll close down and stay tuned to SCTV for more local government programming.